morning and welcome back to Kirkstone. Well, we've just received a colossal box. It's one of the biggest boxes that we've ever received. It's like a Saturn V of boxes. And as per usual, I'm somewhat mystified by the contents because it is so large, and I've been racking my brains to try and work out what on earth it could possibly be. So let us tarry no longer. Let us expedite proceedings with maximum efficiency and a modicum of joy, because this is a voyage, at the very least, of some discovery. I think I've opened it upside down, which is rather typical for me, but I'm sure it'll manage. Let me slide out the contents and see what we have. After that quick fly through, we have two objects of botanical interest, and this is where we shall start. And this shouldn't require too much identification. It's a group, we know what it is, it's a group of leaves, the dwarf Sansevieria Bonsell. And you can see just how thick those leaves are, and it's in a very small pot. So I shall be what shall I do with this? Shall I split them into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 plants? You know, I think I might. I'll split them into 7 plants on this one rather than keep them together. So 7 individual Bonsell miniature cylindrica relative Sansevierias, nice and small but destined ultimately to be individual plantlets. And then the other, which is quite interesting and exciting, I don't know, my friends, is a plant pot containing, whoa, look at that, but that is my first Dracæna, and this lovely label, and it is a very, very, very impressive label. I don't think I've ever had a label as impressive as that one. Here's a Dracæna cultivar called Yellow Coast. Now I don't know how much of that you can see, and of course Dracænas are quite common and popular and well known to a lot of people, but not to me. And I only came really very interested in Dracæna once they became the coverall genus for Sansevieria. But that is a pretty spectacular plant. I mean, what's going to happen to this plant is possibly even more interesting, certainly to me, because what I'm planning on doing with this plant is using it for propagation. So I'm going to take a cut here. So if I have my scissors, which I'm not going to use right now because I'm going to use a sharp sterile knife, I'm going to make that cut right down there, and I'm going to make the other cut right down there, and I'm going to plant those 2 cuttings of Dracæna Yellow Coast and grow them on. And this trunk, this well-rooted trunk, I'm going to leave, because if you look at the trunk, there are places, for example here, where the next branch is going to be pushing through. So this trunk will actually create more plantlets, and so the cycle will continue. But right now, at least for a few weeks, I'm going to be admiring the gorgeous foliage of this Dracæna, and then the next job here will be to divide and plant up these 7 individual little fatty Bonsells. So that, I'm going to invite you to join me on the next stage of this journey, because where it may be leading may be a surprise to you for those who have been following this series. But I will be with you very soon. What an amazing plant. Look at those shades, those different shadings of greens and yellows and creams. Dracaena Yellow Coast. Absolutely gorgeous. Okay, I'll be with you very soon. Bye for now. Good morning and welcome back to the Sansevieria series on Kirkstone. So we've been having quite a detailed look over the last year or so at the growing collection of Sansevierias here at Kirkstone. A little bit different this one because we're looking at some established plants that we have to do something with. So earlier on in the series, I think it was in fact very early in the series, on episode 1, we met for the first time this fantastic, fast growing now, it wasn't fast growing then, but fast growing now, Sansevieria bella, which we got from our normal supplier, Al Lias, Sansevieria Al, Sans Al on eBay as he trades. And this plant has been flourishing. If you go back to episode 1, you will see exactly where it was, which was up to about there. So we started off, and we'll come back to this in a couple of seconds, we started off with the normal leaf-shaped leaves, and as the plant has matured, we've moved on more to the longer linear lanceolate leaves that we see on the older Sansevieria bella plants. Okay, now this plant has obviously become slightly loose because it's moving towards the kind of stilt-like roots that you see on Sansevieria pinguicula, and basically I don't want two plants in one pot, and the reason it's in this rather fey decorative pot is because this one has been in the house and somebody's wife has decided to not have plant pots because they're not very feminine. We'd rather have decorative pots, so it's not something I get involved with, but I really don't care. So let's get rid of the decorative pot, and there's a couple of things that we need to do. First of all is to rescue the grit. So this is the grit that we use in the topping, so we're going to pour the grit out. There's quite a lot of grit. And some sand. Okay, so having rescued as much grit as possible rather than waste it, we can then see exactly what we have, and what we have is a very happy pair of Sansevieria bella, which were originally one plant but have now become two. So I need the receptacle, and I'm going to pour all of the grit out of here. Now this is quite dry, and to be perfectly honest, very sandy. But I'm going to experiment slightly, and I'm going to increase the humus content from this to something which is a little bit more nutritious. I hope it will be okay. I can get rid of this larger pot because these will both be going into slightly smaller pots, and there we are. There is the separation being made. Each plant has got a very well developed system, a root system, so I'm really not worried in any way whatsoever about what's happening here. Okay, so we're going to use a slightly stratified approach. I'm going to put this old soil, this old very gritty soil, which is about 75% grit or coarse sand. I'm going to put that one slightly away and come back to it. And then I'm going to take the pots that I'm using, which are, as I say, slightly smaller. So there's the old pot diameter, there's the new pot diameter. To show you the difference, I'll put the new pot inside the old pot. So it's about an inch less because it's only one plant and not two. And then I'm going to put some large pebbles in the bottom. And then I'm going to fill any gaps with a small amount of cat litter, which is still very free draining but will stop the pebbles from moving around. Okay, then I'm going to introduce a new potting mix, which is 50% clay-based loam, so quite a clayey, alluvial, loamy substrate, which is J. Arthur Bower's compost, and I've mixed that 50-50 with the Katsan cat litter, which is a fantastic pumice-based free draining material, which I really like. It's ultra hygienic, it's all about the same size, it's standardized, and I really like it. And I'm going to put that in the very bottom of the pot. Okay, and get rid of that bit which I don't need. And then I'm going to take a very small amount of bone meal fertilizer, and I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of bone meal fertilizer in the very bottom of the pot. Now, I have talked about this before on some of the Haworthia videos, and I've shown the results. It really draws the roots down. Okay, now I'm going to take my first plant and I'm going to see how it sits in the pot, and that is exactly where I want it to go. I hope you can see that. Let's move this other Sansevieria out of the way. Okay, I want it to sit like that because Sansevierias do not like to be in pots which are too big. There's a couple of reasons for that. One of them is the fact that when the pot is too big, you will tend to water more. And if you water more, A, it takes longer for the water to drain away out of the pot, or dry, or evaporate from the surface of the pot. And B, it means that the plant is sitting in wetter soil for longer, which means that it is harder for it to actually absorb the small amount of moisture it needs from the soil, and therefore the soil is, I'm repeating myself here slightly, draining slower. So basically, a bigger pot means wetter soil and a longer time for the plant to be sitting in damp soil. And none of these arid area plants like to be sitting in damp soil. So we've got the plant in the pot, we've got the very well established root ball, and we've got the plant in the middle of the pot more or less, which is where it needs to be. So the next job is simply to get a container with our 50-50 mix and then pour this mix into the plant pot. Now, it is obvious, hopefully, that all of these bits of particulate substrate, the compost, will not be going fully around the roots. So once the plant is stable, it's now stable, once the plant is stable and we even off the surface of the soil, what we do is we tap. And the reason we tap is to encourage those particles to go all the way around the roots. And then we've got excess compost that goes back in the bucket. Now you'll see why there was a tray and a pan. And that's the first one done. Okay, so I'll now leave that 1 day, maybe 3 days, 1 to 3 days, depending on the weather. If it's very warm, 1 day. If it's very cool and damp, as it is at present, 3 days. Just in case there has been any micro damage to the roots, let the roots heal and then resume the watering campaign. So the only part of the job which you haven't seen yet is to return the grit that we started with onto the top of the pot. So what have we achieved? What have we done in that exercise? So first of all, we had 2 plants where we had 1. Second of all, each plant has had its compost refreshed and some more nutrients added, not only from the new compost, but from the bone meal fertilizer, and the label goes back in just there, and that's number 1 done. Repotted, Sansevieria, nothing could be easier. And I've actually gone quite a bit slower than normal because of course I'm explaining things as I'm going along. And there we are. So we have 2 plants now, potted up and gritted, and I'll just do the traditional flying overview. So there's one lovely Sansevieria bella, and the second lovely Sansevieria bella, and there we have 2 lovely fantastic Sansevieria bella from Sans. The only thing I wanted to say before I went is it's very interesting to see the evolution of the plant laid bare in its developmental morphology. So you can see those first early leaves are quite unremarkably leaf-like. They're flat and shaped like a leaf would be, and then they very gradually, as time goes on with each developing leaf, become longer and more cylindrical until you end up with these rather magnificent and needle sharp lengthy leaves which you will see on the mature form. So you can actually see the development, almost like an embryological exercise of the plant through its evolution, in the same way that if you see a human embryo, you can see for the first few days it looks like a fish, and in the second few days it becomes more like an amphibian, and then more reptilian, and then gradually mammalian. You can see human evolution in the development of the embryo, and you can see Sansevieria evolution in the development of the leaves. Isn't that interesting? Well, I think it is. There we are. 2 fantastic plants from Sansevieria Al, and more cultivation and propagation advice coming up right now. See you in a few minutes. And welcome back. So the next part of the discussion about propagation revolves around splitting commercially available plants. Now, these plants are available, of course, in supermarkets and shops and general dealers and garages and everywhere. And what people often don't understand is that this isn't a plant. This is a group of rooted leaves. Okay? So there are in fact 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 individual plants here. So what we're going to do very simply is have a look at what we've got and then what we're going to do with them. So the first thing to do, of course, is simply to take them out of the pot. So what you can see straight away is you have some leaves which have been cut, and then those leaves have been rooted, and that saved me a job, because what we have there is a perfect illustration of what has happened and is happening. There's a leaf which has been cut off, and the leaf is starting to root, which is fine, but we've also got a developmental rhizome. That means that the next leaves which are growing are going to come from here, because this is not a plant. This is a leaf which has got roots. Now, in order for the plant to continue its existence as a solitary organism, as an independent plant, it needs to establish all the parts of its body that it had when it was a full individual plant before the leaves were cut off it. And that little nub there is exactly that. That is where the new rhizome will grow from. So there's one, due to the effect of gravity, which has already happened. There's 2. Now you can see the new leaf on that one, or the new growth on that one, is very, very well developed. And it is important when we pop these up that this area is planted into the center of the pot, rather than planting the leaf in the center, because all the future growth which is going to come up out of the ground is going to come out of here. Okay, there's 2, 3. You can see the nub there. 4. Look at that inside. 5. And you can see there, perfect illustration of what I was talking about. That little nub that I showed you on the first one, which was the first one. So there's the first one. There's a little nub there which an inexperienced grower might just miss, and that nub will develop into a growth, a rhizomatous growth, and on the end of that leaf, I've stolen my own punchline. At the end of that particular rhizome, you'll see it starts to green, and that will be where the new leaf comes from. And the same on this guy. See? There's the nub, and on the end of the nub it's starting to green. So we have now, and here's an even better example. Okay, so there's the rooted leaf, and there's the side growth coming up, and there, just in there, can you see that? Just in there, there's a little green leaf starting to grow. I'm just crumbling up this coconut fibre, which the plants have been growing in, because I'm going to try and use as much of this as possible. Now, Sansevierias grow much better if they're not continually disturbed by repotting every year. They don't particularly like it. So I'm going to plant these into pots which are big enough not to require repotting every 5 minutes. So just to remind you, we had 7 plants in this pot, and I'm going to put 1 plant into each of these. And just to compare the diameter, you can see the plant pot that they're going into is about 1 inch bigger. Okay, so what I need to do now is I need to mix this coconut compost with my existing compost. Now, the drainage slits, or the drainage holes, on this particular set of plant pots is very small, so I don't need to use pebbles. Can you see how small those slits are, how narrow? So I'm going to take a handful of my Katsan cat litter, and I'm going to fill that there. Now, some of the very small ones will come through, so it acts as a natural strainer, and then they will stop draining through. And in the very bottom of the pot, I'm going to put some pure clay-based loamy Arthur Boas compost, just about ½ inch. And on top of that compost, I'm going to put a little bit of bone meal. Then I'm going to take my desired plant, and I'm going to choose this one because of the growth. Then I'm going to put some of that 50-50 compost into the pot to a depth of about 3 inches, leaving 1 inch or so at the top, and I'm simply going to place my plant on the top of the pot. Then I'm going to fill in to the depth that I want. Now, there are no real roots to worry about, just those few fibres, and I'm going to lift. Can you see what I'm doing? I'm lifting the plant with my fingers to the height that I want it to be, and then I'm going to tap, which means that the soil is actually going to fill in underneath the plant, because I don't want to plant the leaf too deep into the compost in case it rots. And then to stabilize the plant, although that's actually pretty good, to stabilize the plant, I'm going to get some of my normal topping grit, fill all around. So what I have now is an independently supporting original leaf, and then the developing new plant will grow, which is why I've planted this slightly off center, so that this and this will occupy the middle of the pot. And then I'll repeat that for the next 6, and hopefully very soon I should be moving from rooted leaves to independent plants, 7 thereof. Okay, and I'll see you when I've done that. Yeah, and there we are. So we have those shop bought, mass produced little Sansevieria Boncells, nice fat thick version of Sansevieria cylindrica, about twice as wide, I would say, at the base than Sansevieria cylindrica normally is, and a positive forest of little green spears in a very short number of minutes. So there's one more piece of propagation to come for this video, and I'm going to do that one next. As usual, any questions at all about anything to do with the dragon or snake plant project, anything to do with cuttings or propagation or temperatures or watering or compost requirements, anything at all, ask and I will do my very best to answer. But for now, it's goodbye from the Sansevierias, because what is coming up is something a little bit different, but definitely related. So it's goodbye from this one, which is probably the one which is growing the most. So at some point in a few months' time, you will be seeing this plant again and seeing how it has developed. Goodbye for now. See you in a few minutes. Good morning and welcome back to Kirkstone. You'll remember, of course, from earlier in the video, this large and extremely attractive Dracaena, which has the cultivar name Yellow Coast. And you may be wondering what we're going to do with this Sansevieria. Well, this Dracaena, which is very closely related to Sansevieria, is going to get a little bit of treatment. Now this is a commercially available plant which you can find in a lot of supermarkets and garden centres and horticultural dealers, and the original plant, as you can see, had a stem which was cut off and used for propagation, and I'm not going to do anything too dissimilar to that myself. So earlier on in the series, in the episode I should say, not the series, earlier on in the episode I did point out that I was going to use this for propagation. So the first thing I'm going to do is to remind you that we have 2 strong side branches here, and also the start of further growth coming here. Now this will probably not develop because these are already so well developed. But what I'm going to do is very simple. I'm going to take these nice clean secateurs and I'm going to cut off as close to the plant as possible, making a flat, clean cut. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. And there's another flat, clean cut. Now why am I emphasizing flat, clean cut? Because the flatter and cleaner the cut, the less chance of disease, and most importantly, the more chance of quick rooting. Now this is not rubbish. This in fact is a very important part of the story, because now that the growing points with the leaves on, which attract all the internal attention of the plant, have gone, the plant will have to concentrate on producing new growth. Now it will survive because it's going to get watered, and also because the stem is largely green. Under these scales, if I was to peel them off, which I'm not going to, there will be more green. So this rootstock is perfectly capable of photosynthesizing and creating energy for the plant to come. So that's one at least plant, because we know we've got a branch there, but I think there will be more branches. So I'll put that to one side and look after it very carefully. And then, of course, you'll be wondering what exactly I'm going to be doing with Laurel and Hardy here. Well, I'm going to do something very similar to what I did with the Bonsell Sansevierias that we looked at earlier. I'm going to take a pot. I'm super quick. I'm going to put some material in the bottom. I'm going to put a little bit of raw compost, just sprinkling on the top of that. On the top of that, I'm going to put a tiny bit of bone meal to encourage the roots to come down. Then I'm going to fill the pot with my well-used 50-50 mix of compost and drainage material, whether you use grit or you use, as I am, cat litter here. I'm going to take my sharp edge, I'm going to put it into the pot, and then I'm going to fill from the sides just for the sake of stability. Now some of you now will be thinking, I know, what a small pot for such a big plant. But please remember, at this stage all we're trying to do is to encourage the plant to make roots. We're not in any way treating this as a cultivated plant, it is merely a cutting. And those roots having been established, I will know, because the roots will come out of the bottom of the pot, and then we will repot into a larger pot. But the advantages of always deliberately underpotting, and I cannot restate and overemphasize this enough, is that it minimizes the plant rotting. Because with no roots, the only way that moisture can escape from this root ball, or this compost and substrate in the pot, is by evaporation. So the plant ball, which is actually the rooting medium that we're encouraging the roots to explore, will actually stay moist for quite a long time. And as the plant will not be transpiring as much because it's not taking up water from the bottom, there is that chance, even though it's the summer and it's very warm in the greenhouse, there is that chance of rot. So to minimize that, we use a smaller pot which holds less moisture and less likely to create a problem. And that's it. So we've done one. We'll very quickly fly through that procedure for a second time. We take our perspective cutting, we put some drainage material in the bottom. So there's the drainage material, if you can see it. We put a little bit of compost on top of that. This is pure compost. And on top of the pure compost, we just put a very small amount of bone meal fertilizer. We then start to fill the pot with our very free draining 50-50 compost. Place the plant in the pot and we continue to fill around the pot, and this is purely for the sake of stability. So I'm filling up, and I fill up and shake, so that's now stable, and we now have two lovely Dracaena cuttings, whereas before we had one plant. And there'll be more to come, because let's not forget that we do have that stalk ready to start producing more. So there we are. If I was in the commercial business of growing Dracaenas or Sansevierias, I could increase my stock relatively quickly. But as I am not, and I'm just growing plants for interest and for my own collection, then I have two, one to grow and one to swap or give away as a present. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed a slightly different look at snakes and dragons, this cultivation, propagation and horticultural requirements of Sansevierias and Dracænas. Just remember, a well-drained compost, freely draining, whatever commercially available compost or substrate that you buy, always add, please, at least 50% draining material. Whether you use alpine grit, horticultural grit, large scale sharp sand, horticultural sand, or as I'm starting to use increasingly because it's so easily available and so clean and hygienic, cat sand, cat litter. You can use vermiculite, you can use tufa, you can use perlite. There's many things you can use. As long as you have at least 50% drainage material, then your plants will flourish. So I won't over egg the pudding. Thanks for watching. I do hope you enjoyed the horticultural take on what I get up to at Kirkstone. And it's goodbye from me for now, and goodbye from Dracæna. Look, isn't it a lovely plant? It really is a beautiful plant. Okay, bye for now. See you very soon. Bye bye. Good morning and welcome back. We've had quite a light package has arrived into the in tray, and I don't know what it is, but it's very light, so I have no idea whether it is apposite to the current project. But a quick slice and dice and a bit of cardboard surgery and I will know one way or the other what it is. But today is not a very cheerful day. In fact, it is extremely uncheerful. So let me see what is written on here. Oh, okay, so it is pertinent and germane, relevant and cogent, and very well packed. Now you've just seen me take off the top layer of bubble wrap. So inside we've got a sturdy cardboard bolster to stop things moving around, and then a little bit of paper to protect the leaves, and if I can do this the right way up, in this pot, which is a sellotaped in this pot which was sellotaped in, we have got a lovely little cream striped Dracæna duramensis, a duramensis cultivar of a dragon plant, which has been expertly packed, I would say. So expertly packed, of course, as usual. I can't quite work out how to get in, so I'm going to have to resort to the trusty rusty scissors, which stand me in good stead most of the time. Try not to cut through the pot. Another one of my favourite clever tricks. And cut up here, I think will probably get me in the quickest way. I'm as good at opening these things as somebody who's not very good at opening things. The poor display of the cardboard box opener's art. But hey ho, there we are. None of us are perfect. Least of all, Professor Kirkstone. Right, so around the plant we've got a moist, because the substrate itself is moist, sleeve, and in the compost we have a lovely, perfect, I would say, Dracæna duramensis, a cream striped Dracæna duramensis. Isn't that a gorgeous little plant? And the answer is yes it is. And I don't need to do anything to that for the time being. It's not in an overly big pot. It'll probably be in that pot for at least another year. And I'm super impressed with the seller Stelmo222 on eBay UK. So I don't know what I need to do in terms of flying overview. It's just one plant, but I can give you some close-ups. There is Dracaena duramensis, a cream hybrid, which may have a horticultural name, I know not, but it is, in any case, what it is. So I'll just take some photographs and include it onto the video, and that's my morning's work done, because I've got some other non-plant stuff to do. I know, unbelievable, but sometimes it does happen. So I'm going to sign off from this super delivery from Stelmo222 on eBay UK, and Dracaena duramensis is also saying goodbye for now. Bye.